Ancient texts tell us that human beings used to live for more than 800 years. Does this prove that pre-flood civilizations were real? Let's take a look. Tamuanchan. In ancient Mesoamerica, civilizations had a slightly different version of heaven than their Christian counterparts in Europe. For many groups living throughout Mexico, including the Aztec and Maya, they believed in a place called Tamuanchan. It was both a paradise and potentially the home of a pre-flood civilization. Tamuanchan was a mythical realm that a person could reach upon their death. Not only was Tamuanchan a beautiful afterlife that people looked forward to their whole lives, but it was also the home of the gods. Mexican cultures believed that Tamuanchan was the birthplace of all humanity. This mystical place was where humans first entered the world and where their spirits went when they died. It also may have been a place in the real world where an advanced civilization thrived centuries before the Aztec or the Maya. Juan de Tovar was a Jesuit priest who wrote an exceptional chronicle on the beliefs of the Mesoamerican people. While most of the Spanish were trying to erase the ancient history, the Jesuit was trying to preserve it. In his book, the Tovar Codex, he described Tamuanchan as the Aztec version of the Garden of Eden. In Aztec mythology, getting to this place of paradise wasn't an easy feat. After a person died, they awoke in the dark and dreary underworld known as Xibalba. They had to fight through demons and restless spirits, as well as a series of supernatural worlds. And only then did they arrive at Tamuanchan. It was a whole ordeal, one that could only be completed by the most fearless of people. If Tamuanchan was a real place, where was it and what happened to it? Researcher Alfredo Lopez Austin has suggested that Tamuanchan was in Cuernavaca or Iztactepetl, but other historians think Tamuanchan was closer to the Gulf Coast. It's believed that Tamuanchan was the original home of the Aztec. It may have been the homeland of a mighty civilization that was destroyed by an unknown cataclysmic event, most likely a flood. And now for a quick break. I wanted to give a big thank you to Hi Senpai and Creative Millionaire for supporting this channel. Thank you so much! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family, because why not? The real Olympians. The gods of ancient Olympus may have been based on a real group of powerful people who came from an advanced society before the worldwide flood. Scholars have suggested that the goddess Athena may have actually been Noah's daughter-in-law. In a lot of ancient religions, gods are depicted as great beings with supernatural features. In Egypt, the gods are anthropomorphic. They are spliced with animals like Horus, the hawk god. And in India, the gods are incredible beings with too many arms and outrageous powers. In Greek mythology, though, the gods of Olympus are ordinary people. They do have powers, great powers, to make mortals shudder, but they look like ordinary folk. Zeus was a man who could hurl thunderbolts, and Athena was an extremely intelligent woman. Countless idols across the Mediterranean prove that the Greek gods were modeled after normal men and women over 2,500 years ago. Some historians believe this may have been because the Greek gods were real people of flesh and blood. Specifically, the gods may have been the ancient ancestors of the Greeks from a time before Greek society. Athena in particular was of great importance to the Greek people. Her name appears in the oldest written Greek known to scholars, a type of writing called Linear B. In these ancient texts, she's referred to as Athanatos, which translates to the Immortal One. According to the Bible, there was a world before the flood. It was an epic place with big cities and advanced cultures, but the cultures were sinful, which was why God wiped them out with a flood. Even if you take God out of the equation, ancient records from around the globe suggest that there was a flood that destroyed an ancient society. The people before the flood lived significantly longer than the people who came after the flood. For example, Noah, the one who built the ark, lived for 950 years. After Noah and his sons, people started living shorter lives. Whatever had made the antediluvian people live so long, it was erased with the flood that swept across the world. People like Noah and his immediate relatives who lived for so long would have been immortalized by the newly risen societies. To the men and women only living a few decades, Noah and his offspring would have seemed like immortal gods. And this is where the whole thing with the Olympians and Athena comes into play. Scholars have suggested that Athena was really Nama, the wife of Noah's son Ham. The book of Genesis claims that Nama was the daughter of Lamech, who ruled the Canaanites prior to the flood. When the flood waters receded and society began again, Athena, aka Nama, existed in society for nearly 1,000 years. It's no wonder that the Greeks saw her as a deity. They could have based all the Olympians around the long-living descendants of Noah and the pre-flood world. What do you think of this story? Let me know in the comments. The paracas skulls. Over 300 elongated skulls have been found in Peru's Paracas Desert. While mainstream scientists claim that the skulls are from a human society who practiced cranial deformation, not everyone agrees. The skulls may have been from a much older civilization who mixed their genes with aliens. Elongated skulls aren't unusual to find. They've been located all across the world, from South America to Egypt. But the Paracas skulls are unique. The first one was found by Julio Tello in 1928. They are larger than other elongated skulls found in different parts of the world. Scientists also say they contain unknown strands of DNA. There have been many tests done on the skulls since there are so many of them, and the tests all seem to indicate that structurally, they aren't entirely human. But first, let's dive into the mainstream theory. The accepted explanation for the strange skulls is cranial deformation. An infant's head was deformed on purpose using 2 pieces of wood. The child's head was basically stuck between some boards until it grew into an elongated shape. Archaeologists say this was no different than modern tattoos or piercing because it was a body modification. It was a practice that had something to do with spiritual belief or social status. And maybe that's true, but these skulls have so much more going on. For example, tests have shown that the Paracas skulls belonged to people who had red or blonde hair. This is crazy because no other people in South America were known to have had any other color of hair besides black and brown. They were totally different from everyone else. There is no definitive conclusion to the mystery. Some believe the skulls are evidence of Nephilim, the unholy abominations from the Bible created before the flood. But others think they are proof that aliens experimented with gene splicing thousands of years ago. The skulls may be evidence that extraterrestrials created a mixed race of humans and aliens. Did humans land here first? Gobiklitepe is one of the few pieces of archaeological evidence to support an advanced civilization before the flood. That's because it's a megalithic temple that was built using sophisticated engineering techniques 6,000 years before Stonehenge. If you're into pre-flood civilizations, you've likely heard of Gobiklitepe already. Gobiklitepe was discovered in the 1960s, buried beneath farmland in Turkey. This site is about 6 miles from Urfa and is dated to roughly 9,500 BC. Amazingly, it's anywhere between 11,000 and 12,000 years old. But what's inside the site itself? It isn't evidence of a vast city, but rather of a society who worked together when other humans lived in caves. Archaeologists have unveiled megaliths, stone monuments, and ritual circles. There are pillars decorated in anthropomorphic gods, so the site appears to be religious in nature. It looks like a pagan temple, or like any ancient stone circle in Europe. The problem is that it's so much older. It dates to around the same time biblical scholars say the flood took place. Even in the world of mainstream science, Gobiklitepe is hotly contested. Nobody can agree on who built it or what it was used for. When Klaus Schmidt investigated the ruins in 1963, he called Gobiklitepe the first temple in the world. He believed it was a place of worship for groups of nomadic hunters. But others think Gobiklitepe was the real Garden of Eden, the physical location where Adam and Eve were created by God. As of 2021, only 5% of this site had been fully excavated. A site that could prove a civilization existed before a massive flood has hardly even been explored. Then there's the bizarre twist of Tepe, a nearly identical site that was found nearby. This other site is roughly the same age, maybe even older. So how many more sites are there from 12,000 years ago that haven't been found? The hobbits. In 2003, scientists discovered an entirely new species of human on an Indonesian island. This ancient species of human was likely part of a unique civilization tens of thousands of years ago, and some think they could still be hiding in the jungles of Asia. The discovery was made on the island of Flores, a beautiful but wild place. A series of bones were identified as belonging to a previously unknown human species. The species was named Homo floresiensis. The unique thing about them is that they were really short, only growing to a maximum of 3'7". They've been nicknamed hobbits because they resembled hobbits from the Lord of the Rings. They were even extremely hairy, just like Tolkien's hobbits. By dating the ancient bones, scientists were able to determine that the last of the hobbits died out around 54,000 years ago. Scientists at Flinders University were able to connect the DNA of the hobbits to Homo habilis, another ancient relative of modern humans. The baffling thing is that they only appear on an island in Indonesia. So how did a whole species end up only living on the island of Flores? Did they migrate from Africa? Were there other groups of hobbits in other places whose bones haven't been found? And an even more important question is this: how many unique human species existed tens or hundreds of thousands of years ago? The Indonesian hobbits likely weren't technologically advanced. They were small and simplistic, though likely quite intelligent. Locals on the island tell tales of ape-like humanoids, which they believe could be thriving in untouched parts of the jungle. It's possible that they've even moved underground, becoming a race of deep-dwelling hominids. Pre-flood human fossils. One of the biggest questions you might be asking yourself is, if there was a civilization before the flood, where are their fossils? If there was a flood that destroyed a global civilization, it would have been an enormous flood. A flood of that magnitude would have destroyed everything living at the time. Underwater mud flows would have been powerful enough to grind human bones into powder. Anyone alive, and likely any city standing, would have been completely obliterated. So there wouldn't be any evidence left. Humans already have very low fossilization potential, and when you add catastrophic geological processes to the mix, there is an almost 0% chance of finding buried human bones. There's also an extremely low chance of finding a surviving structure from before the flood. Gobiklitepe may have been found simply because it was on a tall hill, which before the flood may have been a mountaintop. There's another interesting point that's often overlooked. Prior to the flood, the population would have been very small. In the book of Genesis, the Bible says the earth was filled with violence. There was likely a civilization, maybe even more than one, but the populations were small, leaving even less for modern archaeologists to find and research. The Great Eridu. According to ancient Babylonian legend, Eridu was the first city that was ever established on the planet. It was built by the gods long before the flood swept away civilization. The city of Eridu belonged to Enki, the ancient Anunnaki god of wisdom and magic. The myths of Mesopotamia claim that Enki was the sole deity responsible for planet Earth. He was by himself until his brother Enlil showed up, and only then did civilization start to spread. Eridu rose in the desert south of the Euphrates River. It was a real place, confirmed by a series of sandy hills and a poorly preserved pyramid. There were 4 other major cities built by the Anunnaki prior to the flood. Ancient Sumerian texts claim that the 5 cities were ruled by 8 kings for around 800 to 1,000 years. Just like Noah and his family from the Bible, the early kings of Sumer lived insanely long. So, could they have been related? Many scholars find it strange that only in the cradle of civilization did people supposedly live for upwards of 800 years. It feels like more than a myth, especially since Eridu is still around, albeit in ruins. The oldest structures are about 5,500 years old, making researchers think that earlier traces of habitation were wiped away by the flood. The myths of the world. If you're not convinced yet of a pre-flood civilization, let me take you through the flood myths of the Old World. From Asia to South America, ancient cultures claimed that a flood destroyed their civilizations. In India, Lord Vishnu appeared to a man named Manu and warned him of a flood that was about to come. Vishnu told the human to collect all the grains of the world and store them in a boat. That way, when the flood waters receded, he could regrow the lost plants. The story is almost identical to the one from the Bible, only it's plants instead of animals. In Welsh legend, the creature Afanc caused a massive flood that left only 2 human survivors. The 2 survivors also constructed a boat just like an ark that carried 1 pair of every species of animal available. The Choctaw tribes of North America used to tell stories of the great water that rolled over the mountains and spread across the land. The epic flood destroyed everything and everyone, leaving only a few families left who had constructed a giant raft to stay safe. In Hawaii, Nu'u was the ark builder. He constructed a boat to escape an incredible deluge, and when the floodwaters receded, his boat rested on top of Mauna Kea. It's also said that Nu praised the moon for his survival. All over the world, it seems like every civilization has a myth or a story about a great flood. Is it all just coincidence? Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Cahokia, what is today nothing but mounds of green grass near St. Louis, Missouri, was once the site of the largest ever pre-Columbian settlement anywhere north of the Mexican border. It was occupied from between 800 and 1400 AD, consisting of at least 120 mounds during its peak. At the time, it was one of the greatest cities in the world, even larger than London was in the year 1250. The culture occupied much of the Mississippi Valley, and each mound had its own purpose. For example, there were mounds used for public buildings and for burials. Archaeologists even discovered an astronomical observatory built of wooden posts that they dubbed Woodhenge. Yet despite so much archaeological evidence collected by the experts, we still don't really know a lot about the ancient Mississippian civilization or what happened to them. Like many of the other pre-urban societies of North America, they vanished between 1300 and 1400, leaving no evidence behind as to why they left or where they went. The Sanxingdui aliens. The Sanxingdui ruins were discovered in 1929 in China's Sichuan province, completely by accident. The story goes, a peasant was repairing a sewage ditch when he uncovered jade and stone artifacts. But their importance wasn't really understood until 30 years later, when archaeologists uncovered 2 pits of Bronze Age treasures, including more jade figurines, 100 elephant tusks, and enormous bronze sculptures measuring 8 feet tall. The treasures were broken and buried, indicating they were destroyed as sacrifice. But who were these people? Now known as the Sanxingdui, scientists still don't know much about this mysterious ancient society. There are rumors that these statues and sculptures actually depict aliens. Of course, this is not likely the case, and Chinese archaeologists have strongly refuted any theory that the ancient culture was in contact with extraterrestrial beings. They are actually pretty offended by it. And yet scientists can't explain the bizarre figurines found both at the Sanxingdui ruins and at the less famous Eridu site in China's Henan province. There are a lot more questions than answers, which is why conspiracy theorists are trying to fill in the blanks. Archaeologists better hurry up. These statues and masks depict humanoid beings with huge heads, pointy ears, and enlarged eyeballs. They could certainly be artistic representations of some kind of deity, perhaps a god or a family of gods. The similarity between the figurines from the 2 different archaeological sites suggests that the civilizations may have communicated with each other. What's truly interesting about the Sanxingdui ruins is that no texts of any kind have been found at the site. Some have speculated that writing could have been made on organic material like cloth or silk, meaning that all of it has decayed since the mysterious civilization vanished. We know nothing specific about their practices or what they believed in. Perhaps earthquakes and landslides are to blame for their demise. An enormous catastrophe may have cut off their water supply, forcing them to move. But the question is, where did they go? And why did they not re-emerge somewhere else? The utopian Indus. Historians have wanted to know for a very long time how the Indus civilization flourished for 700 years without crafting a single piece of weaponry, and with no evidence of kings or queens, indicating that the society may have been run by elected officials. According to historical texts, the Indus civilization was paradise on earth. The issue is that nobody can figure out why. The Indus civilization was one of 4 major players at the beginning of the kingdoms on earth. Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, and ancient China were all glorified in warfare, but those who lived in the Indus Valley functioned as a utopia from between 2600 and 1900 BC, never succumbing to violence or bloodshed like the other civilizations around them. There have been at least 1,000 settlements discovered in what was once the Indus territory, a huge swath of land covering much of Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan. Today, experts agree that the Indus civilization likely built the bones of what would become the Indian civilization, and they probably created Hinduism. Archaeologists know that the Indus society was quite advanced. The famous city of Mohenjo-daro was made by skilled builders and urban planners, but there are no temples, palaces, or monuments, no obvious central seat of government. Everything was organized and clean. There was a system of seals and weights to control the exchange of goods, and they specialized in export and trade. But most impressive, perhaps, was the control over water. There were sewage systems, drainage systems, toilets, bathing areas in each house, and even small pools. One theory is that their ideology was cleanliness. There is also evidence of the city being quite wealthy, with artifacts such as ivory, lapis, carnelian, and gold beads, as well as the baked brick city structures themselves. However, the cities of the Indus Valley civilization don't show signs of fortification. Were they non-violent? Did they not have enemies? Perhaps their lack of military led to their decline. They couldn't defend themselves and were probably annihilated, though nobody has any clue who wiped them out or how it happened. The Stonehenge builders. Stonehenge is one of the most iconic archaeological and historical sites in the world. But who really built Stonehenge? They are known as the builders, but even though this place is perhaps one of the most studied places on Earth, there is still much we don't know about what Stonehenge really is, or the people who made it. It was definitely a burial ground and had great spiritual and religious significance. It took a lot of people a lot of effort to build this place between 3000 and 2000 BC, and some of the stones were brought from hundreds of miles away. Archaeologists are still debating what Stonehenge represents. Its alignment with the stars and the human remains indicate it had a lot to do with the dead and with astronomy, serving as a type of calendar. It also appears to have been a very important gathering place for ancient people. A popular belief is that Stonehenge was built by Druid priests, or perhaps by the wizard Merlin himself. Most recent DNA analysis shows that ancestors of the people who built Stonehenge traveled west across the Mediterranean to get to Britain. Neolithic Britons were farmers and had dark skin and blue or green eyes, and brought the tradition of building monuments using large stones. Towards the end of the Neolithic era, the farmers were replaced by another new population known as the Bell Beaker people, who migrated from inland Europe. They had lighter skin with dark eyes. Something happened, and the Neolithic cultures began to collapse. The cliff-dwelling Anasazi. The Anasazi people, or the ancestral Puebloans, are famous for their entire villages or pueblos built into cliffs. They lived in what is now the current Four Corners region of the United States, most famously Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon. The name Anasazi actually comes from the Navajo Indians and loosely translates to mean enemy ancestors. This ancient Native American civilization lived in sandstone dwellings carved deep into secluded canyons. The ruins here are in abundance, with many saying that the Anasazi were one of the greatest Neolithic civilizations anywhere in America. To this day, there are still giant towers left over and huge ceremonial chambers with ceilings that weigh up to 90 tons. They could only be reached by climbing and were fortified against enemies. They created roads and irrigation systems for watering their crops and used colorful pottery, woven baskets, and sandstone to decorate their homes, greatly influencing what Southwest style means today. The Anasazi civilization lived in this area for over 1,000 years, but in a single generation, they were gone. Between 1275 and 1300 AD, they stopped building entirely, and the land was left empty. They are often compared to the Maya in the sense that they were an advanced civilization that was prosperous, healthy, advanced in arts and science, and nobody knows why they disappeared. Scientists have no idea where they went, why they abandoned their capital, or what kind of unseen force may have played a part in their great exodus. The theory is that an extreme drought hit the desert area and they were forced to leave. Looking for the rain, it is rumored that they headed south, leaving trails of pottery and architecture along the way. The Canaanites. The Canaanite civilization is mentioned multiple times in the Bible. It is one of the most mysterious ancient societies that we know almost nothing about. That is, until recently, when new archaeological evidence revealed that the ancient Canaanites may have crafted the earliest pieces of an alphabet that we still use today. Archaeologists investigating the old Canaanite settlement of Lachish discovered a pottery shard dating back 3,500 years, inscribed with what they say is the oldest text anywhere in Israel, written using an alphabetic script. Earlier texts have been found from the Canaanite civilization, but they were written using hieroglyphics or other outdated methods. What this discovery has done is fill a gap in the earliest history of the written word. From what scientists can understand, Canaanite migrants developed the alphabet in ancient Egypt. This is the very alphabet that would spread around the world and ultimately become what is used today in English, Spanish, French, and many other languages. The pottery fragment itself was probably imported from Cyprus and was written on with ink in the earliest Canaanite alphabet. Scientists have not been able to decipher the short text, nor have they been able to figure out how the Canaanites managed to go from hieroglyphics to an actual alphabet. The Hittite civilization. An archaeological discovery made over 100 years ago has been the source of some recent controversy. It involves the ancient biblical society of the Hittites, with experts now saying that proof of the Hittite civilization validates the historical record of the Bible, seeing as the Hittites are mentioned repeatedly throughout both the Hebrew and Christian Bibles. Historians have argued for many years over the existence of the Hittite, or at least their relationship with the biblical scripts. There simply hasn't been enough archaeological evidence to prove they ever existed. The Hittites were mentioned in the Old Testament at least 50 times. Then, in the early 1900s, German archaeologist Hugo Winkler heard of mysterious clay tablets found by looters in Turkey. He organized excavations in the area between 1906 and 1912, finding sculptures, temples, and a fortified tower. Even though the German archaeologists believed these ruins belonged to the Hittite civilization, there was no definitive proof. It wasn't until Hugo discovered what he believed was once a royal archive room filled with over 10,000 ancient clay tablets that the truth came to life. These tablets were deciphered by a Czech professor at the University of Vienna in 1915, at which point it was announced to the world that this ancient site was once the capital city of the Hittite kingdom, and that they had been known throughout history by another name, the Hattusha. But here's where the controversy, skepticism, and doubt came into play. Even though this discovery was made so long ago, people still argue against the Hittite culture ever being represented in the Bible. Some claim the Bible is talking about a completely different civilization of people with a similar name. Unfortunately, there is no way to tell which civilization is depicted in the Bible. Scientists don't even know what became of these people, where they came from, or why their capital was abandoned. Neolithic salt miners. Way before Stonehenge, people in Neolithic Britain were already mining salt. That's how important salt has been to humans. A new discovery of an extremely old salt processing site in the United Kingdom has archaeologists saying that whoever lived in Britain way before Stonehenge was built may have been the first salt miners anywhere in Europe. Called salterns, there have been several found in continental Europe, mostly in Poland and the Balkans, dating back to the Iron Age. This salt mine dates back to 3,800 BC and was found at a coastal hilltop archaeological site near Loftus. Archaeologists uncovered a trench with broken shards of pottery, 3 hearths, and evidence of a storage pit. Some of the pieces of pottery still contain salt deposits. All the evidence points to salt processing. According to Steve Sherlock, the archaeologist who was in charge of the dig, the people who used this mine for processing salt were probably pioneers and the first in the United Kingdom to clear forests to build settlements. Pottery found here was introduced by people who migrated from northern France about 4000 BC, and they are the ones that most likely brought the salt mining know-how. But like pretty much every group of Neolithic people anywhere in the world 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, we don't really know who they were. We do know that salt would have been a rare and highly valuable commodity at the time, as it allowed foodstuffs to be preserved for use throughout the winter. Other structures found at the site indicate that it was a wealthy and thriving community. The unknown kingdom of King Hartapu. In a very rare occurrence, archaeologists in Turkey have discovered a civilization previously unknown to historians. According to Professor James Osborne, an archaeologist who specializes in Iron Age cities, nobody had any idea about the ancient kingdom. They discovered it in 2019, when a farmer told the group of archaeologists that he found a piece of stone with strange writing on it in a nearby canal. It was clear the group was standing at an ancient site that had been lost to time. While they couldn't begin excavations immediately, James Osborne was able to get the curious stone tablet translated. The writing on the tablet was nothing short of shocking. It turned out to be some kind of military boast, written by someone named King Hartapu. Nobody had ever heard of this guy before, yet the stone told of a great military victory over the kingdom of Phrygia led by the infamous King Midas. It's true that Phrygia had been ruled by many different kings who went by the name of Midas. But dating of the stone corresponds to the time in which the true King Midas, the one who turned things to gold with his touch, ruled over Phrygia. Phrygia was a powerhouse kingdom, and defeating it would have taken a significant force. It's hard to believe that historians had never heard of this kingdom before, but thanks to King Hartapu and King Midas, they were not entirely lost to history. Researchers are, of course, excited to learn more and piece together the ancient puzzle. The Anunnaki gods. Who are the Anunnaki? Anyone obsessed with mysterious ancient civilizations knows that the Anunnaki are at the very top of the list when it comes to the unknown. Depending on who you ask, the Anunnaki can be one of many things. Some claim they were the gods of the Sumerian civilization that existed from 4100 to 1750 BC, as is suggested by stone artifacts and ancient depictions left behind. The Sumerians were the first civilization on Earth to divide time into hours and minutes, putting them at the forefront of human advancement. It makes sense that they also came up with one of the first complex religions featuring a pantheon of powerful deities. But wait just a minute, because some believe that the Anunnaki were not simply gods made up out of thin air by the Sumerians. There is a popular theory that says the Anunnaki were actually a civilization of their own. Some claim they were living, breathing beings. Of course, these same people believe that the Anunnaki were an ancient civilization of space travelers who came to Earth to enslave the human race, beginning with the Sumerians. But whether the Anunnaki were indeed a civilization of their own, possibly a society of reptilian humanoids that played a crucial role in advancing humankind, or if they were just mythological deities, well, science has no way of knowing, at least not until they come back and finish what they started.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Longyou Caves. A group of farmers in China's Zhejiang province received the surprise of a lifetime in 1992 when they drained several small ponds in their village and discovered some enormous caves. It turned out to be an ancient underground world that nobody knew existed. All signs point toward the caves being carved out on purpose by some ancient civilization. But the question is, who were they? So far, 36 grottos have been discovered, including 5 enormous caverns, in total covering 30,000 square meters. The curious thing is that none of them are connected. They were carved into solid siltstone, with pillars evenly distributed throughout to support the ceiling and walls. Every stone column and wall is uniformly decorated with chisel marks, creating parallel lines. The marks make everything look like a pattern, which would have taken a very long time, especially in the dark. There are also stone carvings of animals like horses, fish, and birds. The structures collect rainwater runoff from ground level and are equipped with sophisticated drainage systems for managing excess water. Based on the sheer size of the caves, scientists estimate that it would have taken 1,000 people working day and night for 6 years to complete. It probably took much longer than that, but so far there is no evidence of tools or construction methods. The large scale of the caves and the architectural design and attention to detail indicate that they were made by a very advanced society. But ever since their discovery, archaeologists, scientists, and historians have been unable to determine who built the Longyou caves, why they were built, and what they were for. The only known historical record mentioning the caves is a 17th century poem, which doesn't really reveal much. Clay pots discovered on the cavern's floors were dated to sometime between 206 BC and 23 AD, suggesting that the caves are at least 2,000 years old. Perhaps the caves were tombs, storage facilities of some kind, barracks for soldiers, or perhaps it was used for some type of mining. Only one of these caves is open to tourists so far, and despite years of research, the civilization responsible remains unexplained. Axumite Empire. Considered one of the least documented civilizations of the ancient world, the Axumite Empire was an African kingdom that spanned modern-day Eritrea and northern Ethiopia, as well as parts of Djibouti, Somalia, and Somaliland. It rose to power around 80 AD and lasted for many centuries, meeting its downfall in 825. The Kingdom of Aksum was a major player along a commercial trade route between the Roman Empire and ancient India. It had its own currency for trading and participated in the politics of kingdoms across the Red Sea and the Arabian Peninsula. Aksum was the first sub-Saharan empire to mint its own coins and adopt Christianity, but researchers know very little else about it. Outside of Egypt and Sudan, it's the earliest complex society or major civilization in Africa, archaeologist Michael Harrower told The New Scientist. Aksum stopped producing coins in the early 7th century. Meanwhile, residents were forced inland for safety, where they sought refuge from some sort of upheaval on higher ground. The capital was abandoned and resettled at a yet unknown location. One theory suggests that the Aksum Empire became economically isolated as other civilizations dominated the Red Sea, naturally leading to its decline. On the other hand, legend holds that a Jewish queen named Yodit ordered the burning of Aksum's Christian churches around 960, but several modern historians doubt that she ever even existed. Another hypothesis suggests that a pagan queen named Bani al-Hamwiya from a rivaling tribe ended Aksumite power. Climate change is also cited as a possible triggering factor for the Kingdom of Aksum's collapse. During the 1st century, increased rains vastly improved the region's food supply and lengthened the annual growing season. But food production had to support a large population, and it's possible that the land simply could not endure the intensity of cultivation that the culture required, and that soil erosion ultimately led to the Aksumite Empire's downfall. In late 2019, archaeologists announced the discovery of Beta Samati, a lost Aksum city located between its capital, also named Aksum, and the Red Sea, thanks to locals tipping them off about the buried site, which sits over 10 feet below ground. Experts hope that the settlement will help them learn more about the enigmatic empire and its decline, which began during the mid-6th century. The Cucuteni Tripilians. The Neolithic Cucuteni Tripilian culture, also known as the tripolye culture, existed in what is now Eastern Europe, encompassing parts of modern-day Moldova, Ukraine, and Russia. It rose to prominence around 5,500 BC and lasted until 2,750 BC. The civilization's settlements were small and dense. Sometime between 4,000 and 3,500 BC, the Cucuteni Tripilia civilization built Neolithic Europe's largest settlements, with populations numbering between 20,000 and 46,000 people. Evidence shows that the culture had a habit of destroying its settlements every 60 to 80 years by burning them down, for reasons that scientists still don't understand. Oftentimes, they built new settlements on top of the burned-down remains of past ones. For example, the Poduri site in Romania bears evidence of 13 habitation levels throughout its existence. The Cucuteni Tripilians also left behind no signs of a written language. Between this and the seemingly ritual burning of their cities, experts have very little to work with in terms of learning about the culture. The few clues left behind include clay totems, copper tools, and spiritual treasures. Rediscovered during the late 19th century, evidence of the civilization shows that Neolithic Eastern Europe played a bigger role in human advancement than it was previously credited for, but the lingering question of what and how it contributed remain. The Rapa Nui. Hundreds of years ago, a small group of Polynesians left their homeland for unknown reasons and rowed their vessels through the Pacific Ocean. They eventually settled on a remote island known today as Easter Island, located roughly 2,182 miles off the modern-day Chilean coast. Found uninhabited, this small 63-square-mile island boasted lush greenery and rolling hills. The settlers named it Rapa Nui. There they built massive monolithic structures called moai. Also known as the Easter Island Heads, some of these mysterious sculptures still stand today. The more archaeologists and researchers learn, the more intriguing Easter Island becomes. The immense stone figures are a testament to the society's artistry and engineering. Scientists can't seem to agree on exactly when the Rapa Nui people arrived on the island. It was previously believed that they came between 700 and 800 AD, but a radiocarbon analysis shows that they may have arrived as late as 1200. Others think that the Rapa Nui came to the island much sooner, perhaps as early as 300 AD. Some question how they were able to plot their course to get to the island in the first place. Researchers also struggle to understand why the civilization collapsed. Perhaps they ran out of food. It looks like at some point deforestation and agriculture caused palm trees and grass to dwindle, leaving behind eroded, nutrient-deprived soil that became practically impossible to cultivate. The island was practically barren by the time the Dutch arrived in 1722. One theory holds that the Rapa Nui civilization consisted of several tribes throughout the island, and that these factions began warring against one another when food became scarce and the threat of starvation loomed. Another hypothesis, based on findings indicating that the Rapa Nui may have arrived around 1200, suggests that the environmental destruction they suffered from happened extremely fast. Rat bones found at an ancient settlement site point toward the possibility that this invasive species contributed to the society's swift downfall. Archaeologist Terry Hunt does not believe that humans could have destroyed the island's forests so quickly on their own, and that the rodents fed on the once abundant plant life until there was practically nothing left.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Ubaid culture. Although Sumeria has long been considered the earliest known civilization, it may have even been predated by the Ubaidian culture. Like the Sumerians and the Teotihuacanos in Mexico, their origins are unknown. They lived in ancient Mesopotamia and dated back to 5,500 to 4000 BC. This early society is credited with building the first unwalled village settlements, as well as open courtyards, paved streets, and the first temples of public architecture in Mesopotamia. They had developed architectural and agricultural techniques with irrigation. In 1919, at the Tel al-Ubaid archaeological site in modern-day Iraq, historian Harry Reginald Hall and his team discovered a series of pre-Sumerian male and female lizard-like figurines. Similar statues were also found in and Eridu. They're depicted in various positions and look like they are wearing a helmet and shoulder padding. Some of the figurines were of female lizards with humanoid features nursing their reptilian babies. Archaeologists are unsure what these 7,000-year-old statues were used for or what they are supposed to represent. It looks like perhaps the Ubaid people worshipped a reptilian god. These types of statues are found often in other areas of Mesopotamia, dating back to the same time. Serpents and lizards were symbolic in many ancient societies, so it is not so difficult to believe that these mysterious statues may have somehow played a part of ancient people's lives. We're just not sure what it was yet. Lost Kingdom of Ancient Turkey. A farmer in southern Turkey made a fascinating discovery in 2019 when he stumbled upon a large, partially submerged stone or stele containing mysterious inscriptions in an irrigation canal. Several months later, the man notified local archaeologists who noticed that the stone's hieroglyphs are Luwian, an Indo-European language native to Turkey, and which was common in the area during the Bronze and Iron Ages. The stele told the story of an ancient civilization that may have defeated Phrygia, a kingdom ruled by King Midas during the late 8th century BC. Remember, King Midas is famous in mythology for turning whatever he touched into gold. Archaeologists said they had no idea about this kingdom. The stone's inscriptions indicate that its message came directly from the lost civilization's ruler, King Hartapu. The society was likely one of the largest settlements in ancient Turkey throughout its existence, which researchers believe lasted from the 9th to the 7th centuries BC and spanned a roughly 300-acre area at its peak. Archaeologists don't know the civilization's name, but are actively working to learn what they can about it by excavating its suspected capital at an archaeological site called Turkmen Karahoyuk. King Hartapu has been mentioned in at least one other inscription, but the details about who he was and his significance are vague. It's always exciting when we discover a lost kingdom, don't you think? Pre-Columbian Puerto Rican society. During the 1800s, a Puerto Rican monk named Jose Maria Nazario announced his discovery of 800 carved stone statuettes at an undisclosed location. According to his narrative, a dying old woman had summoned him to her home and revealed the site of ancient treasure her family had been protecting for centuries. Naturally, Nazario's strange story was controversial, with many chalking it up to a tall tale or a forgery, while others admitted that the statuettes might be genuine, but their discoverer's account of finding them perhaps didn't add up. Nazario, who was a religious man, claimed that the statues were made by members of the 10 lost tribes of Israel, who he believed traveled to Puerto Rico by first crossing through Siberia. That's kind of far, right? Known as the Nazario collection, the artifacts contain images of different shapes, some resembling humanoid figures, while other markings remain unidentified, with some seemingly representing an ancient, unknown writing system. To this day, the authenticity of the pieces remains in question, while radiocarbon dating originally dated the statuettes to sometime between 900 BC and 900 AD, and an analysis of their material showed that it was locally sourced. The language reflected in their carvings is a mystery. Researchers can do little else but speculate about the origins of the statuettes, with some experts theorizing that they were created by a lost civilization. Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are a series of deities worshipped by the ancient Sumerians and later the Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. These ancient civilizations, located mostly in Mesopotamia, are known as the cradle of civilization. The Sumerians are most famous for their contributions to humanity, including cuneiform writing, governance, architecture, and they are considered the creators of our civilization as we know it. Established around 4,500 years ago, they consisted of several city-states, including Ur and Uruk, with a population of up to 80,000 people. The famous Epic of Gilgamesh comes from the Sumerians. They worshipped the Anunnaki, who were the children of the sky god and the earth goddess. But now some people consider that the Anunnaki were not actually mythological, but a real group of people on Earth who posed as gods. Authors Michael Cremo and Eric von Daniken pointed toward the Anunnaki to support the far-flung theory that ancient astronauts visited Earth during prehistoric times. In Daniken's opinion, religious figures detailed in Sumerian texts and the Old Testament contain signs of an alien race making contact with ancient humans. Russian-American author Zecharia Sitchin claimed in his 1976 book, The 12th Planet, that the Anunnaki were an advanced humanoid alien race from Nibiru, a yet undiscovered planet, and that they visited Earth 500,000 years ago to mine gold. Sitchin also asserted that this extraterrestrial society intermingled with Homo erectus, a predecessor to modern humans, resulting in hybrid offspring. Some even go as far as to say the Anunnaki sky gods may have even created the human species to be a slave race to do their bidding, mostly to mine gold. The Anunnaki left Earth when the Antarctic glacier melted, resulting in the Great Flood, only to return and teach agriculture to humankind. Additionally, Sitchin credited the Anunnaki with building the Great Pyramids and various other monumental structures. This is the beginning of the ancient astronaut hypothesis, which says that alien beings have influenced human affairs. Proponents of this theory argue that the Anunnaki, or similar, brought advanced technology to humanity and explains all of the out-of-place artifacts that have been found by mainstream science that haven't yet been explained. Our knowledge of astronomy and mathematics is said to be given to us by the Anunnaki. Some even go as far as to say that they are still around, influencing politics and corporations, like the Illuminati. Not surprisingly, historians, archaeologists, mathematicians, astronomers, and more discredit these claims, accusing these people of twisting ancient Sumerian writings to their favor by conveniently mistranslating words, shortening quotes, and quoting them out of context. Ancient Aliens on the History Channel has also helped to make this theory much more mainstream. While there is a lot we don't know yet about human evolution, scientists say that it's important to give these ancient societies credit for what they did, and that the Anunnaki are part of a mythological and spiritual pantheon, no more real than the Greek gods and goddesses that we might be more familiar with. What do you think? Were the Anunnaki any more than what historians say? A collection of deities worshipped by a handful of ancient civilizations? Or something else entirely? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We'd love to have you! Khwarazm Shah Dynasty. In the dry desert of northern Uzbekistan, there are mysterious desert towers, left behind by a lost civilization. The archaeological site of Ayas Kala is home to 3 kalas, or mountain fortresses, which constitute some of the last known remnants of the Khwarazm Shah Dynasty, a lost civilization that existed from the 4th century BC until the 7th century AD. Khwarazm Shah flourished for roughly 1,000 years before it was ultimately abandoned. The 3 fortresses built at Ayas Kala near the Amu Darya River and at the edge of the Kizilkum Desert represent the most remote and rugged of the civilization's structures, and each one is unique. There is no evidence of permanent dwellings at the site of Fortress Number 1, leading some experts to believe that it housed military members in temporary dwellings such as tents or reed huts. It sits above Ayas Kala II, a feudal fortress dating back to the 6th to 8th centuries, and Ayas Kala III, a fortified garrison from the 1st and 2nd centuries. Little is known about the mysterious civilization that built the fortresses, which were abandoned during the 7th century and possibly briefly inhabited again during the 13th century. 1,200 years passed by before they were rediscovered by Soviet archaeologists, and now they look like they are melting, battered by the winds and snow in winter and flooding and dry heat in the summer. Unknown rock art creators. Northern Israel and the surrounding region are scattered with thousands of ancient tombs called dolmens. Erected between 4,000 and 5,000 years ago during the Intermediate Bronze Era, the structures represent a yet unidentified civilization who researchers have had little luck learning more about. Experts caught a lucky break when in 2018, a ranger working in the Yehudia Nature Reserve noticed cave carvings while going about her day. She contacted the Israeli Antiquities Authority, and archaeologists who reported to the site quickly identified the carvings as genuine rock art. The zoomorphic images depict 3 westward-facing horned animals and 3 eastward-facing ones, along with 2 that are facing each other, likely a male and a female. In 2012, researcher Gonan Sharon happened upon a field containing around 400 dolmens. While looking up at the domed roof of the largest monument, Sharon noticed unnatural, weird shapes, which turned out to be man-made carvings of tridents. Known as the Shamir carvings, the artwork revived archaeological interest in the area's dolmens, sparking increased discoveries in recent years. We know very little of the actual culture of the people who built them, Sharon told the news media, explaining that bits and pieces of ceramics, jewelry, spearheads, and other items have been found, but it's very rare to find artifacts, let alone anything major or telling of the dolmen's creators. The cave art discoveries have certainly furthered experts' knowledge, but they also pose new questions about the ancient culture, whose identity remains elusive. Why those animals, wondered IAA archaeologist Yuri Berger. Why in these dolmens but not others? What made this one special? Scientists are hoping to learn more about this mysterious culture. Tel Moza. In July 2019, highway construction workers in Israel uncovered evidence of a city that existed in a sort of transitional state between hunter-gatherer culture and agricultural invention. The site, Tel Moza, sits northwest of ancient Jerusalem, and it calls into question previous understandings of when humankind first transitioned from a nomadic lifestyle to farming and permanent settlements, a time known as the Agricultural Revolution. Archaeologists from the IAA spent a year and a half excavating the site, which turned out to be a huge Stone Age settlement roughly 1/3 of a mile long. At its peak, it was likely a thriving metropolis containing homes with plastered floors and walls, alleyways, an Israelite temple, and more. Figurines of human men were found at Tel Moza, but their significance remains unknown. The evidence suggests that humans may have lived in the area as far back as 20,000 years ago, but for now, the settlement is considered around 9,000 years old, dating back to the pre-pottery Neolithic period. Findings show that humans occupied Tel Moza as early as the 8th or 7th century BC, and that people were intermittently present at the site up until the 20th century. Based on an abundance of artifacts dating back to the 10th to 6th centuries BC, during the Iron Age, archaeologists have confirmed Tel Moza as the biblical site of Moza, which was first mentioned in the book of Joshua. As much as experts know about Tel Moza, the people who inhabited the city remain somewhat of a mystery. What they left behind offers an extremely rare glimpse into the religious practices and rituals of the time, but the details of their everyday lives and customs are less clear. Cahokia. Located in what is now southern Anatolia, Turkey, the Neolithic settlement at Cahokia existed from around 7,100 BC to 5,700 BC. Composed of prehistoric mound settlements, the proto-city reached its peak around 7,000 BC and was ultimately abandoned before the Bronze Age. A team led by archaeologist James Millart excavated Catalhuyuk starting in 1958 and learned that the people who lived there were part of an advanced culture and that their city represented its center. The settlement was long-lasting, as evidenced by the 18 layers of buildings that were found there. Most of the structures appear to be domestic in nature, with no outwardly identifiable public facilities being present at the site, although the purposes of some of the rooms and buildings are unknown. People lived in mud brick houses that were combined in a honeycomb-like maze to form a single structure. The building was equipped with ladders, stairs, and holes, which made the dwellings accessible. Residents kept their homes immaculately clean, leaving behind little debris. The settlement is dotted with murals, figurines, and human burials, but a temple is conspicuously lacking. Based on its architecture, it's believed that the average population at Catalhuyuk numbered between 5,000 and 7,000 residents, and at its peak, as many as 10,000 people lived there. Researchers also think that the population fluctuated over time. But they only know so much about the people who lived there based primarily on the clues that the site offers. For one, the society appears to have been egalitarian in nature, meaning that most people were equal, very rare during this time period, and it lacked a clear distinction between social strata. Plus, all clues point toward the society's religion being based on a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. But that's about all experts know thus far, and given the age of Catalhuyuk's ruins, it's very hard to learn more. Guanche natives. In February of this year, amateur archaeologists discovered the remains of mummies on the island of Gran Canaria, part of Spain's Canary Islands. Using a drone, they were able to locate 62 adults and 10 newborns in the Guayadeque ravine, in a difficult-to-access spot situated roughly 75 feet down a series of cliffs. Concerned the site was at risk of being vandalized, the discoverers informed archaeologists, who confirmed the discovery, estimating that the cave the remains were found in dates back to sometime between the 8th and 10th centuries. The mummies belonged to members of the Guanche people, an Aboriginal group that inhabited the Canary Islands. Burial shrouds made from animal skins and vegetable fibers were also found at the site. The Guanches, who likely migrated to the archipelago around 1000 BC, were ethnically and culturally absorbed by Spanish settlers who arrived between 1402 and 1496. While there are around 1,200 known archaeological sites on Gran Canaria, this one is unique, particularly due to the presence of such young remains. Aside from this, the discovery confirms that all the indigenous people that once inhabited the island were buried in the same manner. But where did the Guanche people, the original inhabitants of the Canary Islands, come from? DNA evidence recently proved that they migrated there from North America, and evidence suggests that they lived a hunter-gatherer lifestyle characteristic of the Stone Age. But by and large, the Guanche are more mysterious than anything to modern researchers, who believe that they lived in caves and huts and made do with very few tools. They likely possessed knowledge of basic pottery and farming, and it's suspected that they built numerous pyramids found throughout Tenerife, although this has not yet been proven. Extraterrestrial visitors? The ancient astronaut theory suggests that extraterrestrials visited the prehistoric world and helped early humans learn advanced engineering, architectural, and agricultural skills. This belief comes in various forms. Like I mentioned before, Swiss author Erich von Däniken championed this theory throughout the 1960s and 70s with his best-selling book, Chariots of the Gods, and numerous sequels. He claimed that numerous archaeological sites and artifacts, including Stonehenge, Pumapunku, the Moai monoliths of Easter Island, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the Baghdad Battery, were all made with more sophisticated technology than what was available at the time, indicating that they were created by aliens from outer space. Maybe not the Anunnaki, but some form of civilization that was very advanced and that science just can't explain. Von Däniken believed that certain ancient art depicted air and spacecrafts, intelligent non-human beings, ancient astronauts, and abnormally advanced technology. While he is not considered an archaeological expert by the academic community, in his opinion, he asserted that geographically separated societies shared common themes in their artwork, pointing towards shared extraterrestrial origins. Von Däniken's claims don't stand up to experts who accuse him of misrepresenting data, making unfounded claims, and making unproven claims. They also believe that he influences the beliefs of his followers, who know nothing about how to look at artifacts and take whatever he says at face value because it's more fun than the truth. His books are more science fiction and entertaining than anything else. I mean, you have to admit that the idea of aliens coming and helping the ancient Egyptians build pyramids is pretty fun. But why didn't they give ancient people electricity as well while they were at it? Or the ability to travel, or advanced medical knowledge? In fact, von Daniken himself admitted that the Nazca lines, which he insisted were made by aliens, could have human roots. And unlike many of us, there are people out there who dedicate their lives to learning more about these mysterious places and civilizations who made them to ensure that their contributions to humanity are not lost to time. Thanks for watching! Which civilization would you like to belong to? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe and don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video. See you next time! Bye!